that is not the subject matter at hand. The subject matter at hand is this. Why, out of all faiths, must we take on the faiths that cause the confusion amongst our people? Why amongst all faiths must we deal with the faith that our slave masters use on us, which was a clear testament that God does not exist? Unless you could explain to me why your God would allow your people to be enslaved by a people calling on his name. Don't you think intelligent black men and women would now denounce a God that can be called on by the slave master, who can perpetuate his imprisonment on your people year in and year out to no avail, making us eunuchs, double castrating us, cutting our penis and our balls off? And now you tell me it is safe to study and adhere to the very religion that the man that double castrated us in the East got away with, so he can have sex with our women and water us down in race? Are you kidding me? Explain. Why should we worship your God when he ain't do shit for black people all those years?
Polite.
Why?
Polite. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Why should we worship your God when he ain't do shit for us?
But let's get this understood. First of all, when we using this context of slavery, we have to understand.
Are you going to answer the question? Because you did this the other night.
Hold on. Check this out. When you use the context of slavery, you have to know what slavery is, right? So slavery is to put yourself in bondage, right? To be in bondage, right? So what the white man did was not just put us in bondage.
No. Let's talk about that goddamn Arab. Let's talk about that Arab first.
We're using this term slavery and making it synonymous across the board, which is a very, very big mistake.
So the Muslims didn't enslave black people? So black Muslims, hold on. No, stop. Black Muslims didn't enslave black people the way I'm talking about?
Listen.
Hold on, before we move forward, stop. Before we move forward, I am talking about castration. I'm talking about being murdered. I'm talking about not having the right of freedom to read or write what I want. Are you saying Muslims did not do this in the name of Allah to black people?
I'm telling you, Muslims did not do that in the name of Allah to black people. All
right, yo, I'm done talking to him. Yo, we talk to you later. I can't do this. I'm not doing this. You're disrespectful for saying that. You're disrespecting your whole race. Nah, you're disrespecting your whole race, and you're not gonna make yourself the special Muslim. Yeah, I hear you. See you later. You come up here and you complain, vent your frustration, but I'm not gonna let no nigga tell me that Muslims didn't oppress and enslave and castrate and lynch and incapacitate, stop us from reading and writing. I'm not gonna let no nigga tell me that. In the name of Allah, in the name of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the same damn demon that was used and called upon to enslave our people. You can't get away with that. I would be wrong to allow the people to listen to you speak any further. At least keep it real and say, yeah, Muslims did enslave other Muslims. Now we got to get into what slavery is. So what you going to do? Tell me about a fancy rendition of slavery that is different so we can let these motherfuckers off the hook? Are you serious? See, I'm sorry again for the vulgarity. I'm going to stop with this. This is the reason. You see, if black men going to get turned up, we should get turned up on some real scholarly shit. On real. Word to everything I love. And I'm going to slow down with the cursing because I really want to stop that. You know, because I know people want to have their children watching this and all. So I really decide within myself I got to slow down. But for the youth that's out there watching, know if you are going to curse somebody out, let it be the one that is trying to present the slave master's trash to you and tell you now that they ain't enslave us. How the hell am I going to allow him to speak on this show? It's supposed to be for educational purposes. I don't mind disagreeing with somebody. But this ain't going to be like the other night with Bashir when he's trying to, what's the definition of good? All this craziness. Now, what is slavery, brother? Brother, you know what slavery I'm talking about. I'm talking about us being made into eunuchs. I'm talking about us not being able to reproduce ourselves. I'm talking about us not having the freedom and the privilege to be left to our own vices so we can advance our own society or destroy it of our own free will and of our own accord. That's what I'm talking about. So let's not play crazy when we talk about slavery. You ain't going to give me no fancy slavery because I ain't talking about no fancy slavery. I ain't talking about no indentured servants. I know what you're talking about. I'm not crazy. I know that willing slavery indentured servitude that people could go into and then be returned to their family. We're not going to play games like the slavery that I'm talking about didn't transpire within the confines of Islam. That is disrespectful to black people, and you are hiding the facts on behalf of your Arab slave master. God damn it. You ain't even hiding from the white slave master. You hiding for the Arab slave master, who, in my opinion, is worse than the white slave master. The white slave master monetized slavery and made niggas think it was more impressive to be a slave under the white man than the Arab, because the Arab was so damn vicious to us. You see all those mulattoes running around in Africa right now? You think light-skinned people in naturally populated Africa? They double castrated us and raped the women by the millions. The man in the world leading and most babies ever made was a damn Muslim who had over 10,000 black men in servitude with their penises cut, and had the most women in bondage that were black women, and raped them, every last one of them. And who he couldn't rape, he let his soldiers rape them and watered them down. And that's why you see the coolie hair Arab today that look a little like he's black. It look like he has, phenotypically it looks like he has some black features. And you're going to ignore all of that and tell me no Muslim enslaved us? You're going to ignore all of that and see them black features on them Arabs and think that that is natural? All because you're trying to protect the law, but you'll shit on the Bible in a heartbeat and tell Tazariak his ass is crazy. But you think nothing's wrong with you, though. You see, you guys, man, that's the dogma I'm talking about. Just the long pauses he goes through when he's asked questions. It's that thing that takes place in religion where a brother or sister knows he has to cover up for a slave master, so he pauses. But under normal circumstances and conditions, he would have been able to answer those questions in real time. In real time, he would have been able to answer those questions under normal human criteria and circumstances. But when you ask these religious people something, they go blank when it's common sense. Notice this all the time. Now we got to define the word slavery. Come on.
All right, boss here.
Come on, man. Move to a different subject. You can't do that. Not until you admit Muslims enslave black people.
Hold up, boss here.
Hold on. You can't talk until you admit Muslims enslave black people.
You gotta admit that, boss.
Take you and cut you up and rape your women. And they
Yes.
say that they're Muslim, but they are not Muslim.
I hear you.
The Quran
They ain't have a Quran in their goddamn hand?
is the guide. So if you show me in the Quran where it says to castrate them, then I'll say, you know what, Quran? You're absolutely right.
Did Prophet Muhammad have slaves? Did Prophet Muhammad have slaves? Did Prophet Muhammad have slaves?
Prophet Muhammad didn't have slaves, brother.
Yo, I'm out of here. I'm done. Look, I'll talk to you another time. I gotta catch a flight. I gotta catch a flight.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Mit Gebeten hat man sie gelockt. Die Araber bringen bereits im 7. Jahrhundert den Islam nach Afrika und mit ihm die Sklaverei. Denn wer kein Moslem werden will, wird als Sklave in die muslimische Welt verschleppt. 17 Millionen Schwarzafrikaner trifft dieses Schicksal. Die Geschichte dieses Menschenhandels ist in Afrika bis heute ein Tabu. Tidiane Ndiaye bricht das Schweigen. Der senegalesische Anthropologe fordert, die Sklaverei der Moslems endlich aufzuarbeiten. In seinem Buch »Der verschleierte Völkermord« beschreibt Ndiaye dieses wenig erforschte Kapitel der Geschichte.
Der muslimische Sklavenhandel war der längste in der Geschichte der Menschheit. Er währte 13 Jahrhunderte und hatte viel mehr Opfer als der Sklavenhandel nach Amerika, der 400 Jahre dauerte. Und das Traurigste daran ist, dass die meisten der Verschleppten unglücklicherweise keine Kinder bekommen konnten, weil sie kastriert wurden.
In die arabische Welt, in die Türkei, nach Persien und nach Indien werden die Schwarzafrikaner verschifft. Oder sie werden durch die Sahara nach Nordafrika getrieben. Viele sterben schon bei den Überfällen auf die Dörfer, viele an den Strapazen des Transports. Wer auf den Sklavenmärkten ankommt, wird kastriert. Laut Ndiaye überlebt nur einer von 5 diese gefährliche Operation. Die grausame Prozedur trifft alle, die Männer, die auf Plantagen oder im Bergbau schuften, ebenso wie die, die im Haushalt arbeiten oder die Harems bewachen. Diese Eunuchen findet man noch Anfang des 20. Jahrhunderts.
Die Araber und die Nordafrikaner waren Rassisten. Sie verachteten die Schwarzen. Deshalb wollten sie nicht, dass sie in ihren Ländern Kinder zeugten. Das erklärt, warum es dort heute keine starke schwarze Diaspora gibt wie in den USA, die eine Aufarbeitung dieser Geschichte fordert und eine Wiedergutmachung.
An die Sklaverei der Europäer wird auf der senegalesischen Insel Boré erinnert. Hier wurden Tausende eingepfercht und nach Amerika verschifft. Solche Erinnerungsorte forderten Ndiaye auch für den brutalen Menschenhandel der Moslems. Der ist für ihn ein Völkermord, denn ein Volk von Kastrierten kann keine Nachkommen zeugen und stirbt zwangsläufig aus. Die Versklavung geschah übrigens im Namen Allahs.
Der Koran hat die Sklaverei niemals unterbunden. Im Gegenteil, es gibt viele Stellen im Koran, die die Versklavung von Nichtmuslimen empfehlen. Und im Gegensatz zur Ächtung der Sklaverei im Europa der Aufklärung gab es nie auch nur einen arabischen Intellektuellen, der sich je für die Sache der Schwarzen eingesetzt hat.
Im Sudan rufen die Araber schon im 7. Jahrhundert den Dschihad, den heiligen Krieg gegen die Schwarzen, aus. Noch heute werden hier Tausende von ihren eigenen Landsleuten versklavt. Viele Afrikaner beten in Moscheen, obwohl ihre Vorfahren im Namen des Islam geknechtet wurden. Über Jahrhunderte wurden afrikanische Könige gezwungen, sich dem Islam zu unterwerfen und noch dazu Sklaven als Schutzgeld auszuliefern.
Durch die Islamisierung wurden die afrikanischen Könige zu Mittätern. Wer sich dem Islam unterwarf, konnte der Versklavung theoretisch entgehen. Wer kein Moslem werden wollte, sollte gezielt gejagt werden. Das war der Grund für die Kollaboration und das entfachte viele Kriege zwischen den afrikanischen Völkern.
Die Europäer schauen bis ins frühe 20. Jahrhundert zu. Obwohl sie den Menschenhandel längst verboten haben, dulden ihn die Kolonialarmeen vor Ort. Ein Zentrum des schmutzigen Geschäfts ist die ostafrikanische Insel Sansibar. Hier landen die Menschen nach dem Verbot der Sklaverei in unterirdischen Verliesen. Den berüchtigten Tipu-Tip macht der Menschenhandel zum zweitreichsten Mann Sansibars. Noch nach 1920 schuften Sklaven auf den Plantagen der Insel. 13 Jahrhunderte Sklaverei aufarbeiten, dafür gibt es offenbar weder in Afrika noch in der islamischen Welt Bereitschaft.
Es gibt eine Solidarität zwischen den Afrikanern und den Arabern wegen der gemeinsamen Religion, dem Islam. Man zieht es vor, über diese schmerzhafte Geschichte nicht zu sprechen. Man richtet die Aufmerksamkeit lieber auf die Schuldigen, die alle schon kennen, die Europäer und die Amerikaner.
Tidiane Ndiaye will das nicht hinnehmen, weder als Intellektueller noch als Enkel eines senegalesischen Königs. Und auch nicht als Muslim.
I'm here in the heart of Birmingham, Alabama, and just across the way is the 16th Street Baptist Church, where on the 15th of September 1963, Ku Klux Klan members came and decided to blow it up. And inside the church, 4 girls died. Later, Martin Luther King led a march down these streets. They were met with water cannons and dogs, and here in the park there's memorials to remember what had happened then. But I'm thinking about those who have been forgotten, those Africans who weren't taken west to the Americas and to the Caribbean, but those Africans that were taken east into Arab lands. It's interesting that just before the start of the transatlantic slave trade in the 15th century, we see attitudes against black Africans, negative attitudes coming out of Arabia. We see Islamic scholars like Ibn Khaldun say that the Negro nations are submissive to slavery. We see other Islamic scholars like Ibn Sina, Melchizedek. We see other scholars like Al-Tabari talking about the superiority of the Arabs. We can trace actually the negative views on black people coming out of Arabia from the 15th to the 14th to the 13th to the 12th and the 9th century. In fact, scholars such as Bernard Lewis, who recently passed, has said that immediately after the death of Muhammad, we see something changing in terms of colour. You see, before the 7th century, colour was fluid. You wouldn't have black people or white people. You would have people saying, for example, I am white in contrast to this bench, or I'm black in contrast to the grey slabs. Colour was fluid. You would determine your colour by contrasting it with what was around you. But something happened in the 7th century that started to fix colour and specialise colour. And with it, there were characteristics attached to the colour. And in the case of black people, there were negative connotations to that. We also see in the 7th and 8th century, straight after Islam started, we see black people being described as Banu Ham, sons of Ham, and a reference was made back to the Torah, talking about the curse of Ham. It was a curse of blackness, they say, and they linked blackness with slavery. In fact, there isn't a curse of Ham in the Bible, there's a curse of Canaan, and it doesn't relate to the black people. But this is how it was interpreted in Islamic literature, so that Africa became a place where they would get slaves thinking that this was the curse that Allah put on them. Scholars like Dr. John Azuma said that the black people were given the hardest and meanest work in places like Iran, where they had 500 to 5,000 people working on the soil in really difficult conditions. And so the negative attitudes to black people didn't start with the transatlantic slave trade. It was right there before, in the Trans-Saharan Slave Trade. This slave trade went on from the 7th century all the way up until the 21st century or the 20th century. We know that the last Arab nation, or the last nation to stop their slavery, was Mauritania in 1981. But yet last week I was in the Gambia and I heard reports of slaves working down the road belonging to Arab shopkeepers. So we know this is still going on. So whilst we still see the consequences of the transatlantic slave trade in the West and in other places, we see the legacy, we see monuments. People are making an active decision to remember and so not to repeat the mistakes of the past. But what do we find with the Trans-Saharan slavery? We haven't seen one Arab nation apologise for what they did in Africa or in Europe or in India or in Asia. We haven't seen that at all. We haven't seen any monuments put up in any Arab countries. We haven't actually seen any anti-slavery movements take place. In fact, it was the British and then along other countries that forced Arab nations to stop their slave trade. It wouldn't have stopped otherwise. There's something in Christianity that acknowledges the sanctity of man because he's made in the image of God. Do we see that in the Trans-Saharan slave trade? No. Because in Islam, man is not made in the image of God. In Islam, the highest status you can be is a slave. That's the highest way you can relate to Allah. He is God, you are the slave. In Christianity, we're called sons, we're called daughters. There's a relationship that can be developed, not so in Islam. Further, in Islam, you can have slaves. It's within the laws. This was one of the fights against abolition. Allah has guaranteed that you can have slaves in the right conditions. They have to be spoils of war or, passed down, inherited to you, but you can actually have slaves. And so who is anybody to say that you shouldn't have slaves? This is still the attitude in some cases, which explains why it took so long for the Trans-Saharan slave trade to stop. But the question is, we know this now. Why is no one talking about it? Why is it not taught in schools? Why are we concentrating on one trade, as horrific as it was, but not also looking at the other trade, which was equally as horrific, and due to the length of time still continuing, could even be described as more horrific? So the question is this: why are the slaves that went east forgotten? Why are we not talking about this?